Hello, fellow risk takers, and welcome to my worst investment ever. Stories of loss to keep you winning. In our community, we know that to win in investing, you must take risk, but to win big, you've got to reduce it. This episode is sponsored by ACE Academy, which offers online courses that help investors, aspiring professionals, business leaders, and even beginners to improve the finances of their lives and their businesses. Go to myworstinvestmentever.com right now to claim your discount on the course that excites you the most. Fellow risk takers, this is your worst podcast host, Andrew Stotts, and I'm here with featured guest Ari Gunzburg. Ari, are you ready to rock?
Oh, yeah.
So let me tell the audience a bit about you. Ari Gunzburg is a rising new star in personal growth after experiencing trauma as a child and then an extreme volatility as a teenager. As an award winning international speaker, Ari motivates people using personal stories filled with triumph, tragedy, and transformation. Ari also helps inspire people using one on one coaching and his books for both children and adults. New in 2020 is his debut nonfiction title, The Little Book of Greatness. Ari, take a minute and fill in further tidbits about your life.
The main focus that I have working with people, both in large audiences and one-on-one, is really to help people rekindle the magic of life. And I do that using my framework called the 5 Keys to Greatness, which is what that book discusses. uh, People find that it's really easy to remember, really easy to use, but there's also, this is one of the parts of it that I like the most, is that there's a lot of depth to it. As long as you open up your mind to really think about it, to explore it, and to apply it to your life, you can really apply it in many different ways. You can integrate other systems into it if you have a particular self-help system that you really like now, or if you're worried that you're going to find one in the future, you can fit it in. So it's not like adopting this is going to restrict you to only one type of self-help system. It really kind of leaves the door open for you no matter what. Um, Go ahead.
I'm just curious, why is it important for you to tell the audience about trauma and volatility? How did that shape you, in the stories that you tell and in the books and the services that you do?
Well, everybody deals with their own trauma. And so first of all, somebody that I know for quite some time, he was a principal of a day school, and then the next thing I saw him like a number of years later, and he tells me he's a social worker, and we're having this conversation. He's like, I had this real epiphany, and the epiphany was that people go through their lives and they say, oh, I had this thing happen to me, but they're afraid to call it a traumatic experience. They're afraid to say that it was something that left a really big impression on them, because they're like, it wasn't such a big deal compared to things that I know have happened to other people. It wasn't a big deal. But he said, my epiphany was that it doesn't matter what happened to other people. It matters what happens to you, and it matters how it affected you. So what's traumatic for you may not be traumatic for somebody else. True. But if it was traumatic for you, you still need to deal with it. And so what happened to me was traumatic. I think,
Mm.
even if you wanted to sit there and do it from an objective standpoint or not from a subjective standpoint, it was fairly traumatic. I was 10 years old. I was on a hike with a teacher, and the teacher passed away.
Oof.
Yeah. And then, I mean, it didn't get much better there. I mean, there was a number of other problems that started to arise within the schools, and then I started hanging out with a group of friends that all wanted to have fun, and I could say that with like air quotes euphemistically, and I ended up having a lot of fun with them, and getting in some trouble and doing some things that were not the healthiest thing to do as a teenager. I mean, others know what I'm talking about, but
Yep, yep.
you take enough of those things over enough years, and it has an effect. And
Mm.
so I discuss a lot of these things, and then another point of it is that for a long time I wanted to keep away from it and not really discuss it, and just be another member of society, and this way I could hold my head up high, whatever. And then as I started taking this journey to helping people and to speaking and writing and all these things, I realized I can really help a lot more people by being honest, and by telling, well, not, I mean, it's not about being dishonest, but I'm saying
Mm.
by being willing to share my story with other people. And
Maybe
as
being
long as I'm being
vulnerable.
vulnerable, yes, that's a good word. That's a word that I actually use in some places also. It's really vulnerable to sit there and tell your story like that. I mean, like, if I ever have to go get a job and somebody starts looking me up and they're like, and then I come in and they're like, have you ever been to jail? And you're like, you already know the answer to that.
Yep.
You know,
Yeah,
so
because I went to jail
there's,
before I was 18, so it was expunged from my record. So the only way they'd know is if I tell them on my podcast.
yeah. I was at a speech one time at a corporation and I'm like, I sat there and popped out and I was like, has anybody ever? And I'm like, no, don't raise your hand. Because they're sitting there with their colleagues, like,
Yeah.
I don't need you to pop your hand up. And then all of a sudden your colleague's like, wait, what happened?
I think you
And then
should
your
have just
boss
told
is
them.
like, wait, did you tell me about that?
Uh, I,
No,
I
no,
think the
no,
way to
no.
do that is go, everybody look at me intensely. Now blink your eyes if you've been to jail.
You know, yeah. So, I mean,
Oh,
I did it kind of as a joke a little bit, but I actually had somebody pop their hand up. I'm like,
oops.
no, don't do that.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I'm just
but
curious because I mean, one of the things about look for those for the listeners out there, the Little Book of Greatness, a parable about unlocking your destiny, has has only been up for a short amount of time right there on Amazon, and you've got 56 ratings, which is fantastic for published I believe this year, and the ratings are on average 4.6. So you're doing that right. So vulnerability and sharing and all that, you know, works. And I think that's important
so
thing
that
because this show is about vulnerability.
the book doesn't have actually that much autobiographical detail
Hmm.
in it. The next one, or it might not end up being the next one, but I'm saying the next one that I have currently, that's kind of at the forefront of my mind, that will have a substantial chunk of autobiographical data in it. It's funny, somebody that I know that was a bit of a mentor to me growing up, and helped me in considerable ways. I gave him a copy of the book, and I gave him a signed copy of the book, and he messages me within like 24 or 48 hours, and he's like, "I'm not in the acknowledgments." And I'm like, yeah, you're not. And he's like, but I'm not on the, and I was kind of like, just like, listen, the people that I put in the acknowledgments over there were my family, rightfully so. And, God, and, the people who were a part of this book, you had nothing to do with this book. This is not an autobiographical book. This is not talking about anything. This is not discussing the influence that you had in my life whatsoever. It's
Mm.
out of place over here, and it's just, you're not part of that. And I don't know if he's upset about it or not, because it was all done via text message. But what can you do? It didn't feel like the right venue to sit there and list every single person that's
Yeah.
ever helped me in my entire life. I mean, I also plan to publish a lot more books, so there's going to be plenty of more acknowledgement things that acknowledgement
Yep.
pages that I'll be able to sit there and be like, I forgot to mention this person 20 times, and they're getting a spot now.
Just one of the many little things that you deal with when you write a book. But now it's time to share your worst investment ever. And since no one ever goes into their worst investment thinking it will be, tell us a bit about the circumstances leading up to it and then tell us your story.
Sure. So, uh, in Baltimore, in the Jewish community, there is a book called The Advertiser, which is a small book that basically sits there and gets advertisements from all of the community businesses and publishes them and sends it out to every single home throughout the community. Now, my history with this magazine actually goes back a long, long time, back to when I was like 10 or 11 years old, and it was owned by a different person, and it was printed in black and white. And instead of paying the postal service, they would offer, if they had the people to do it, to like 15 or 20 cents or something to drop them off at people's houses and stuff. And so I had a few routes with them. Um, anyways, so I knew about this magazine for a long time, and then I go and I end up in a new community, Cleveland, and I wanted to do something very similar. There was already something that was out there. I don't think it was published that often, but it was like kind of like out there. And I think originally I wanted to do it like years and years beforehand, and I didn't end up going through with it. But now I was actually living there, and I was like, I really should do something. So I reached out to the people who were running it originally, and I made an offer, and they accepted. Or maybe maybe I said that I was interested, and they put a number out there, and I said fine, etc. Whatever. I mean, ultimately, I got my hands on it, and I started working on it. I started putting everything into it, and creating systems, creating processes, and trying to develop it, and trying to sell all the business owners on the idea that they should be in there. Because here's the thing: in Baltimore, where all the business owners kind of assume that they kind of need to be in there because that's where people look to find out what's going on with sales, with businesses, with everything else. it's like almost like a given for a business owner to be in there, because they know that if they want their sale to get out there, if they want people to come into their store, you need to advertise, because people will look through these things. In another town where things are done in a different way, or where it's a little bit more old school, or where there's far fewer choices, or there's just far fewer people, um, people may be a little bit resistant to that. And that's kind of what was happening a little bit, to the point where I asked somebody, I don't want to go into too much detail. I asked somebody one time to run a special for Super Bowl. And they're like, why would I do that? I'm like, because it'll bring you in extra business. They're like, who says I want extra business? Bam, hangs up the phone. I was like, all right, well, I don't really know what to say. Meaning, like, that's just like the type of rebuttal that, like, I don't think there is a rebuttal. If you don't want to be busier, then I don't really know. And that's kind of like the attitude that I continuously was seeing. So I got this thing, and I was trying to like just build it up and make it bigger. And there were times when it seemed like it was really working, and there were times when it really seemed like it was about to go somewhere. And really, ultimately, over the course of 3 years, I just never could get it past a certain point. An additional piece of the lay of the land that was detrimental was that there was also, at the same time, a website that a certain percentage of the people in town went to for information and news, etc., and they were charging very, very low advertising prices. I don't know if it was to put me out of business, or if it because no business ends, or if it was because the fact that they realized that if they charge really low prices, they'll get a lot more business. I don't know. I'm friendly with the guy. I'm still friendly with him. So I don't really know. But like, the fact is that when you say to somebody, a full page ad will be whatever it is, $200, $150, $500, whatever the number is, and it'll take, let's say, 2.5 weeks before it actually gets into people's homes. Or you tell somebody, look, you can put 6 different advertisements in my website for $60 and it'll start tomorrow. There was a lot of, and then people are like, well, why should I spend all that money with you when I can get it from him for $15 or 10 or 20 or whatever the number was? And you're like, because this is a print advertisement that is physically mailed to people's homes, that they actually leaf through and look at, and you get real eyeballs on it. But they didn't care. The only thing they were looking at was the money. Anyways, so it was going on like that, and it was kind of just losing money, but it was like trickling money out, like it wasn't, you do something like that and you're like losing your pants within 4 months, and you're like, that's it, I can't do this anymore. But it was like trickling money. Some of the issues it would make a little bit of money, some of the issues it would lose only $400 or $600 or whatever. And it was hard to tell, because the numbers always kind of looked like they were working, and then they weren't. So it kind of just continued to go really, really badly, until finally one day, I was trying to figure out what to do with my time. And this is about the same time that I made the switch into speaking. At the time, I was running a graphics business and this magazine, and I was speaking to a business coach. The business coach sat there and said, listen, if your magazine business all of a sudden becomes wildly successful, and every single business in town starts using your services for this magazine, right? What's the maximum amount of dollars that it can make? Let's not even talk about net, let's talk about gross. And I sat there and I ran the numbers quickly in my head, and I realized that the number was like, maybe like wildly well, like in 10 years, maybe could be making $500,000 a year. But like at that moment, with the amount of population, the amount of people, the amount of businesses, best was like $250,000 gross. Then you have to take away printing costs, take away labor costs, take away mailing costs, and all this other stuff. And I was like, and it was within seconds of realizing that number that I was like, okay, I'm done. Because at that point, there's no, if I was running a large publishing company and this was one of the properties in the publishing company, $250,000 ain't bad. But since this was the end all be all for that particular aspect, I was like, that's it. I'm walking away from this. And, it's, it's not like so fun to sit there and realize that you put 3 years into something and it didn't work. But one big takeaway, well, two big takeaways is, the first one is, this, if something really truly isn't working, right? If it's really truly not working, the sooner that you realize it, the better off you are. It's
Great
fairly obvious,
lesson.
but it doesn't always come up. And the other one is kind of like, know what you're getting into when you get into it. Like I probably, and this was a big failing of mine, is that, the previous owners were complaining about the business owners and how they didn't want to advertise, right? me thinking that I knew it all and thinking they just didn't have the business sense to get it all together, meaning being incredibly incredibly arrogant and thinking that like I knew and they didn't know, completely and totally dismissed what they said, and then very, very quickly found that they were spot on, and then it just people just weren't interested. Coming up on a holiday, they would sit there and fork over the money sometimes, but they weren't interested in anything. And I like worked out of the box. Like I sat there and offered people like these contracts where I substantially discounted the per issue price in order to get more people to sign on. I sat there and I put events on where I did like a bazaar type thing where I gave out booths, and some of those were successful in the sense that I had a lot of vendors and a lot of people come in, but not successful in the sense that I didn't make a lot of money and it didn't boost up the other part of the business. But I'm
Mm,
saying, like I it wasn't that I just sat there and like ran it for like a little bit and like it didn't work. Like I tried a lot of different things. Could I have tried more? Sure. But again, right, when you're presented with this idea of like what's the best that it's absolutely ever going to do, and the number is just not that high, and that doesn't mean that that idea is done, and I'll explain what I mean in a second.
mm,
But if it's not that high, might be time to walk away. Now, when does that not say that it's done? Well, if you're like trying to put together a nonprofit and you realize that the maximum salary that you can ever get from it is $150,000 a year, right, which is a nice sum, but it's not like what it could be, let's say. That doesn't mean that you have to sit there and say, forget it, it's not worth it because I'm only going to make
mm.
$150,000 or $90,000 a year. First of all, if it's enough money for you, that might be fine. And second of all, if it's something that you're incredibly passionate about, right?
Yeah.
Money's not everything. And a lot of times we forget that living in the world that we do. And we think that money's everything. And like, oh, if I could only be rich. But that's not the end all be all. Like you need to be happy also. You need to be fulfilled also. That's part of the book is about, the 5 keys to greatness.
Right.
But so don't throw in the towel if it's something that you're really passionate about, you really love. But like when I combined the fact that I didn't really love the work, didn't really love I mean, I liked it and I wanted to keep it going. It was my baby, but it wasn't that much my baby, like
Mm.
actual babies are much more important to make sure to be able to support them and whatnot.
It reminds me a little bit of one of my episodes, episode 92, a woman named Inbok Song, and she talked about the idea of good companies die slowly. And it was very interesting. She's an investor, and she's saying because they have cash and all that, you don't really see it happening, but it happens. And I think the parallel in this case is that it's easy to quit a business that instantly fails, but it's hard to know when to quit a business that's kind of making it, a little bit of failure, a little bit of success. That's a huge challenge to come to, to come to the
Yeah.
realization of that.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, by the way, meaning we had many conversations about shutting this thing down before that conversation where he put it to me like that with the maximum amount of dollars you're going to make from it. And in every single conversation, I was incredibly resistant to shutting it down because, again, like I said, like I felt, without necessarily knowing why, but I felt like this was my baby. I don't want to get rid of this. I don't want to shut this down. It's kind of doing okay, and it's going to do okay in the future. And if I can just convince these business owners, blah, 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 blah. And then he sat there and said, well, what's the best it'll do? And I was like, yeah, all right, we're gonna pull the plug on that one.
That's
Take it off of life support.
Yeah. Now, I believe that we talked a little bit beforehand. I'm just curious. You mentioned another challenge that you're facing, and I thought it would be great for the audience to understand a little bit about that. What I would call a tough investment. Maybe you could share a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I mean, I feel like if I'm going to call something my worst investment ever, it needs to kind of be an abject failure. And what we were talking about before, while we were getting to know each other a little bit, was it's not a failure in the sense that, first of all, I haven't given up on it yet, and second of all, I haven't given up on it. No yet involved. I say yet, but it's the Freudian slip maybe. But so when we're launching something new, we can be hit with incredible struggle to get it up and off the ground. And actually, so, one of the things we were talking about before also was online courses. I didn't get a chance to mention, I recorded an online course that I am currently waiting on the video editing to be done with. So I have this framework, the 5 keys to greatness. And so I want to send this information out into the world through 3 different methods, including I'm going, it's something I give away for free, the actual concept of the 5 keys, but to really interact with it, I have 3 products that I want to use. And that's the book, a video e-course, and a workbook, none of which will overlap considerably. They'll overlap a tiny little bit, maybe here and there, but like all with different stories, different exercises, different information, so that if you want to buy all 3, you won't feel like you're repeating the same information. I've done that before, right? Bought like the second version of like a series and everything, like Stephen Covey's keeps on, I mean, he's gone now, but they keep on coming out with new versions of the 7 habits, right? But they're all kind of the same thing, maybe. So like, I didn't want to do that. So, but like, so the last video is about the last key, which is tenacity or persistence. And I actually get real for a little bit in that video. It hasn't been published yet. And I still am hoping that by the time it gets published, it will be not so accurate, but I'm working on building this public speaking thing. I've never done this before. I've done marketing before. I've done websites before. I've never written a book before. I've never published a book before. Well, other than the kids' books. So I'm learning how to do all of this on the fly. And there's certain things that I've done that have been wildly successful. Or maybe, and then there's other things that I've done that have not been. They've fallen somewhat flat. And the things that I've done that have been successful are my speeches. I get out and I connect with the audience. The audience loves it. They enjoy it. The meeting planner gives me good feedback. My book also, you mentioned before that on Amazon, as of this recording, has 56 reviews. I also have some editorial reviews that have come up since then. And, people like the book. They enjoy it. One particular reviewer, he wrote, he's like, I would recommend that you read this book with a pen and paper so you can write down the exercises within the book that are part of the narrative. He said, I'm even going to read this book a second time, which I never do, but I'm going to read this book a second time to be able to take notes because it's worth it. And to hear somebody say that they want to read it a second time immediately after they finish. I've only ever had that happen to me with one book. I read more fiction than nonfiction, by the way, but one book, it was so amazing to me. When I finished reading it, I literally flipped it back to the beginning and started reading it again. I didn't finish it the second time. I got like 80 pages into it or something, but like I liked the world. I like a little bit of sci-fi and fantasy. So I liked the world so much. And if everybody's curious what that book is, I'm not going to no. I'm kidding. It's The Worthing Saga by Orson Scott Card. Okay. But one theme that he consistently explores is what happens if somebody skips through a large period of life, or like that's what the theme that he's exploring in there. Because in there is something that can make it so that you can sit there and basically wake up whenever you want and then sleep for 1,000 years and wake up like nothing ever, like you didn't miss anything. Anyways, so I digress. But so that I've been working on building the speaking business, and I keep on throwing money into it, and some business advisors keep on sitting there and being like, no, go get a job, go do this. And, I got a job over the summer, and it was pretty much hell. There's a number of reasons why I don't necessarily want to go into it. Partially from just because it's not what I'm supposed to be doing, and every single second that I'm doing something that I'm not supposed to be doing is not, it's a moment of torture. And then also partially there was some severe leadership issues there. Let's leave it at that. But we and then like, so it's weird also because like I get it, and I talk to people and I'm like, I'm trying to explain to them like I'm seeing success, and I've booked, some big ticket speeches, and the meeting planners enjoy it. And that, right. And like, I'm talking to people, I'm trying to explain to them, like, I don't need a job. I need like 1 or 2 people that just
you need
can
that
help
breakthrough.
me. I need the breakthrough. I need the tipping point. I need a tiny little bit of investment to sit there and like, just make a couple of plays. I need the business advisor who could sit there and say, yeah, just do this one thing. Okay, now try to do this one thing. And that's what I'm
Ari,
not getting.
I want to introduce you to a really interesting book that could help you. It's called The Little Book of Greatness. And the fifth key is called tenacity or persistence. It focuses on that point.
It does. It does.
Let's stop it at this point, and let me ask you a few questions about. I want to ask you first
I
question.
just want, I do want to just bring up,
Yep.
go back on what you just said.
Yeah.
That's part of, like, when people say like, oh, just go get a job. I'm like, but that's like kind of sitting there and saying that what I'm doing isn't working when I know that it will. It's just,
Yep.
you know, I'm so close. I can taste it. I mean,
Yep.
like,
Yep.
you know, I get in touch with meeting planners. I mean, I had somebody reach out about something that is a topic I don't even come close to talking on. And I pitched them what I was talking about. You know, it was kind of a long shot. And they're like, no, it really doesn't work for the topic that we're looking for, which I knew, you know. But they're also like, but this looks really interesting, and we want to use this for one of our, you know, days that we sit there and do this type of stuff on. So we'll be keeping your information on file. You know, I'm making it to the short list of speakers for a lot of events. And you know, some of them I end up getting the event, other ones I don't. But you know, so like I'm there. It's just, oh man. But yeah, sorry, go ahead.
So what lessons have you learned from, you know, we've got two stories here. They have there's some really, you know, interesting commonalities and differences here, but just list out what lessons you've learned.
Well, so first of all, in the 5 keys, we're going to jump back to that again with the 5th key, with persistence and tenacity. You know, being persistent with things that you really don't want to be doing, or that you really don't like, or that are not working for you, or in the case of an investment that's just losing you money and you don't see a way out of it. And I'm not talking about when somebody's being pessimistic, and I'm not talking about when somebody else is crapping on your dream. I'm talking about when something realistically has nowhere to go. That's not the time to be persistent. Persistence is not all about being persistent at all, you know, for every situation at all costs. I don't think. Persistence is about recognizing when you should stick it out and when you should throw in the towel, and then when you should stick it out, actually sticking it out, and making sure that you do that you exhaust every possible option to go ahead and unlock the greatness that you have within. I mean, we all have amazing, amazing things within us, and for everybody it's different. But we all have such amazing stuff within us, and you know, we just need to be able to find it and bring it to the forefront. And so then you were saying, like, you know, what's going on with these two different things that you said? What was something that I learned about them?
Well, I mean, what are the lessons that you've learned from this, you know, experience?
People, a lot of times when you speak to counselors and coaches and associates and people who you want to get advice from, they'll give you advice. You have to remember that their advice is, first of all, incredibly biased from their own life viewpoint, and second of all, may not be the right advice for you. You know, people just, you know, a lot, you might be trying to do a business that they've never done before or never done successfully, and they'll be like, it's never going to work. But you know it's going to work. I mean,
so
look,
beware,
you know,
of advice.
Yeah, beware of advice. Well, I mean, not beware of advice. It is good to have sounding boards, and it is good to get advice.
Maybe we
from
should
people.
Say be aware, you know,
be
of what you're
aware of the advice
and
you're getting,
where it's coming from,
and recognize where it's coming from, and if it is in line with where you truly see yourself going. And if it's not, then sometimes you have to sit there and say, I really appreciate that you took the time to talk with me, but I really can't listen to anything you have to say. because you know, you're dragging down my dream for no reason. And I know that it's possible. I know that I'm going to be able to do it. And we're going to make it happen.
So let me summarize some of my takeaways. There's a lot of things I take away from this. The first one is, being a finance guy, I'm always looking at the numbers of a business and trying to understand, you know, what's the possibilities. And the best way to illustrate this to somebody is just to think about, you know, somebody comes to you and says, hey, I've got this really great location for a restaurant. And, you know, I got a great chef and it's going to be amazing. And, you know, there's not that many of them around in this particular, you know, genre or whatever. And then what you find is that you ask them, okay, how many tables? Well, there's only 10 in this location. Okay. So how much do you think you can get on average per table per, you know, meal? And he says, well, we're going to probably be about $100 per table. All right. So there's $1,000. How many times do you think you're going to turn those tables over? Well, you know, think we could be good at lunch and dinner. Let's say 2 times. Okay. There's $2,000 and multiply that times how many days you're going to be open. Well, let's, you know, say 30 days. Okay. That is the limit. And
Right.
the idea of expanding, oh yeah, but we're going to open up another restaurant. Okay, that brings on a whole nother level of complexity. So
Yes.
restaurants a great way to help people to understand the market size or the size potential. And once you saw that clearly, you knew, holy crap, this is not what I want to be doing. And that, I think is valuable in the first story that you told us. The
Clarity.
other
Yeah.
the other one is, the question of when do I shut down a business that I'm doing? And I've had a lot of experience with that firsthand. And after the 1997 crisis with our coffee works, our coffee business here, it just looked like, all is lost. All is lost. We don't have that much capital. It's going to be hard to make it, and Thai people aren't drinking as much fresh coffee as we had expected. We knew it was coming, but we could be 10 years early. And so there was all these factors. And in the end, we sat down, the whole management team, and we kind of came up with the conclusion that we're passionate about this, number one, and we're not reinventing the wheel here. This is coffee. And at that point, we kind of realized, nope, we're doubling down and we're going forward. And it was from that moment that we really started to make the business, successful. But it was very slow. I mean, it wasn't like it just shot up after that. But there's that defining moment where you do have to. And I had a second business, which was a training business in Thailand many years ago. And there was a moment when I just realized I've either got to go big with this thing or get out. And I decided I'm not going to spend the time going big with this thing. So I'm out, and I sold my shares to my partner. Now, the other thing is, I have my own experience. I've had some ups and downs in my other business. And 2 years ago, my sister and I were really debating about it. And basically, she's like, go get a job. Just go get a job. And, I was in
I
the
can't hear those
heat.
words. I can't hear those
I
words.
was in the heat of the battle, And I don't think I've ever had such a heated argument with my sister. And it became not even an argument. It's like, I cannot listen to that. It doesn't help me, and I'm not listening. So you can say it all you want, but and you know, someone gave me a piece of advice at the time, and the point was, how much does your sister know about your business? And the answer was, she didn't really know that much. It's just that I was struggling at the time. And so I decided, that I'm going to show her, and I'm going to show the world. And I knew I was passionate about what I was doing. And it really did. She pushed me in very many ways that really did energize me. But and then I built success out of that. So it's hard. You're getting advice throughout our lives. We get advice. We want to listen to advice. It's good to bring all advice on board, but it is your obligation to process that advice, to try to identify what part of it is good for you, what's not. And that's your right, and it's your responsibility. So welcome advice, but just accept that not all of it's going to come from a place of true understanding. And then the last thing, and in that case, it definitely came from a place of love, you know. So you couldn't argue with the genuineness, but she was bringing her experience and her background. The last thing that I took away from your 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 stories is the idea of external factors. When we start businesses and we try to do something, we must consider external factors. Whether there's a shift, for instance, for advertising going online, and that's an external factor that's happening in the world. And if we're not aware of that or whatever, that external factor could either be something we're going to ride or something that's going to crush us. And the same thing, talking about your business right now, is that the coronavirus situation across the world is making it impossibly difficult for even some of the best speakers to
Yes.
get gigs. Budgets are cut. People aren't doing, Zoom. It's nice to think there's these amazing Zoom, keynote speeches going on, but the fact is,
There
people have
are
cut
there
budget.
there are events happening. There are virtual events happening. Very few live events happening, but
Yep.
certainly far less. Certainly the budgets have been cut. And then also, like, something that I've assumed, but without any data to back it up, is that you've got all these speakers who were booked up that were like the best speakers that are like, we're charging 40 grand, and they may have like lost all their stuff. And now they're like, whatever, I'll speak on Zoom for 2 grand. And they're like, I'd much rather get this guy that is world renowned,
Yep.
and so there's less for the, I mean,
When
but I mean, yeah, you always have to look at external factors. Just to be fair, nobody, and I mean nobody, could have imagined coronavirus happening to the extent that it was. So,
Yep.
so yes, I agree with the external factors. I I um, I I will maintain my plausible. I don't want to say deniability, but my plausible, not faultness.
Right.
For not being able to anticipate Corona, just like the rest of the world. I mean, I was watching it in January. I was abroad in January, and I was watching the news about it, and I was like, I don't know where this is going. This might get bad, but I mean, never in a million years did I imagine it would get to what it became.
Mm. All right. So, based on what you learn from these stories and what you continue to learn, what one action would you recommend our listeners take to avoid suffering the same fate?
So I mean, another thing we had talked about beforehand was that a lot of times people are, it's Corona. People are trying to start something new. People are trying to turn over a new leaf, do something new, do something else. Start a business so that they're no longer reliant on somebody else for their salary, which is where a lot of us have ended up getting into trouble. And if you have a business that creates income, then you're able to do that. And so it's not going to be a piece of advice necessarily for my two failures that we brought up, or not failures, but my two my worst investment and my challenging investment that we brought up. But what I would like to bring up is the idea that there's many different businesses that you can go into. And we did talk about clarity a little bit. So
Mm.
having clarity on what you want to do and how it will help people, and whether or not you can actually make money with it, is important.
Yep.
But don't think not don't think vet online courses that are selling you to make online courses or similar things very carefully,
Yep.
because there's a million people out there that are all going to tell you that my system works really, really well. All you have to do is pay me $1,000 to get it. I was recently in a training. It was a little bit important to me what I was hearing from these people. I was recently in a training where they said, okay, so the goal is that you put these people into a funnel, and you get these people first to pay, let's say, $25 or $50 for this. They come in, they're part of that course, and then you get them to pay, let's say, $1,000 for this. They're part of that, then you get them to pay 5,000, then you get them to pay 25 grand. And I'm like, if you ever sold me on something and then tried to upsell me, and then so it's one thing, like, and I'll explain where I
Mm.
felt like it would have been reasonable and okay, and another way. But like, if I feel like every other minute that I get into one of your courses, all you're doing is trying to upsell me, I mean, so you
Trust
have
is
like
broken.
investment. Trust is broken, exactly.
Yep.
But they're saying like, this is going to work, this is going to work. So you have investment courses, I imagine, and I haven't looked at them, but I
Mm.
imagine that one is about this type of investing and one's about this type of investing. And if you want product A, you buy product A. If you want product B, you buy product B.
Yep.
It's not buy product A because I want to get you to buy product B.
Yep.
And I have a short book that I wrote that I never published, that I'm planning on publishing soon. And I will tell you, I'm going to publish it at a low price.
Mm.
And at the end of the book, I will mention the other book that I have out and,
Yep.
try and sell it, but it's not going to be like a hard sell. And
Yep.
all the information that I promise you is going to be in that book is going to be in that book. It's just going to be
Exactly.
like, other books buy, and it'll be like, hopefully people will get a hold of this book and then learn about my other stuff through it.
Okay.
But like,
All right.
oh man, can of worms open.
Yes,
Woo!
exactly. Last question. What's your number one goal for the next 12 months?
So I have a program that I'm working on, a framework. Maybe a program is a better word, a program to help the world and to help people reconnect with themselves, rekindle the life's magic. And the 5 keys to greatness does that, but this one does it in a different way, and it integrates the 5 keys. And I really want to get that launched.
Awesome.
Get it working, get it going on Zoom, get it going in person if we ever get to that point. Get the book that's supposed to accompany it and explain the idea out, get the programs out, and just it's something that I think that can really help people and really help the world. And I want to see that change being made.
Got it. All right, listeners. There you have it. Another story of loss to keep you winning. Remember to go to myworstinvestmentever.com to claim your discount on the course that excites you the most. As we conclude, Ari, I want to thank you again for coming on the show. And on behalf of A Stotts Academy, I hereby award you alumni status for turning your worst investment ever into your best teaching moment. Do you have any parting words for the audience?
I just want to say thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. And, the book is available on Amazon, or you can go to the website, littlebookofgreatness.com. And I really appreciate you having me on the show. Thank you.
Great to have you on. And for the audience out there, I'll also have it in the show notes, but you can go right now to Amazon and type that in. All right, that's a wrap on another great story to help us create, grow, and most importantly, protect our wealth. Fellow risk takers, this is your worst podcast host, Andrew Stotts, saying, I'll see you on the upside.